Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into something really fascinating, maybe a bit unsettling, to AI extenders.
Right, these AI-powered devices that, integrate right into how we think, how we process things.
Exactly. They're meant to perform pretty substantial cognitive tasks, almost becoming like part of your own mind. We're not talking calculators here.
No, much deeper than that. And the real focus for us today, and maybe for you listening, is how these things impact our moral agency, our sense of responsibility.
That's the core of it. We're basing this discussion on a paper from Social Epistemology published April 2025. It's called AI Extended Moral Agency by Telakivi and her colleagues from the University of Helsinki.
A really thought-provoking piece.
It is. So our mission, you could say, is to unpack how these AI extenders might, well, both boost and maybe diminish our ability to act morally.
And what that means for responsibility when it's not just us, but us plus the tech. It's a coupled system.
Yeah. It goes way beyond just convenience, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
you're probably already thinking about this as AI gets more woven into daily life. So we want to really get into the nuances today.
Definitely. The paper gives us a great structure for doing that. So
Yeah.
maybe we should start with the basics. Like, what do we even mean by a morally responsible agent?
Good idea. The paper lays out what they call the standard view. It involves a few key things, right?
First, your action has to be intentional. You meant to do it.
Okay. Then you need some knowledge of the moral stakes, knowing if it's right or wrong, basically.
Crucial.
Hmm.
And third, you need to be acting freely. No, like, coercion or extreme pressure pushing you.
Makes sense. And finally,
Finally, there's this capacity for reflective self-control. That means you can understand moral reasons and actually use them to guide what you do.
got it. So intention, knowledge, freedom, and self-control.
Pretty much. And the paper also flags, conditions that could affect this. Exempting conditions, like a severe mental disorder, might mean someone isn't a moral agent at all in certain ways.
And excusing conditions.
Like if you did something by accident, inadvertently, that might lessen the blame, but doesn't necessarily mean you lack the general capacity. Important distinctions to keep in mind as we bring AI into it.
Right. So how do these AI extenders actually connect to our thinking? The paper talks about extended cognition.
Yeah, this idea that our minds aren't just stuck inside our skulls. Our cognitive processes can actually, loop out into the tools we use.
Like using a notepad to remember things.
Exactly. That's a classic example. But AI extenders are different. They use machine learning. They can adapt, maybe even acquire new cognitive abilities themselves over time.
So they're not just passive tools.
Not at all. But, and this is key, they're not fully autonomous AI either. They're described as non-autonomous parts of a hybrid system. The system is you plus the AI, and that whole system can be autonomous.
Okay, so the AI isn't calling the shots independently, it's integrated.
Right. Think of the taxi driver example they use, using an AI navigation app.
Yeah. The driver gets really good at navigating with the app.
Exactly. Their navigation skill becomes coupled with the tech. Real-time updates, best routes. Super efficient.
But if you took the app away...
Their own unaided navigation skills might have actually gotten worse.
Right.
The ability is now partly in the system, not just in their head.
Okay, that clarifies the extended part. So how does this loop back to moral responsibility? This is where it gets complicated, I guess.
It really does. And they introduced this great thought experiment with Alori, the athlete with ADHD.
Right. He has anxiety, can act out impulsively.
And when he manages to control himself, it takes a huge amount of effort. His coach praises him for that effort, quite rightly.
But then he gets this AI smartwatch.
Yeah, an AI extender.
Hmm.
It senses his anxiety kicking in, prompts him with calming techniques, and suddenly he's managing much better with way less internal struggle.
So the dilemma is, does he still deserve the same level of praise now that it's easier for him?
Exactly. Has his praiseworthiness changed because the AI is doing some of the heavy lifting? Or is his intention to be good still the main thing? It forces you to question how effort factors into our moral judgments.
It really sets the stage perfectly for looking at how these extenders might shift things.
It does. And the paper then explores cases where AI could actually amplify moral agency, help people meet those conditions we talked about. Let's look at Mari first. She has borderline personality disorder.
Okay, so her BPD makes it really hard for her to make free choices, especially around emotional regulation. Maybe she doesn't fully meet that freedom condition sometimes.
That's the idea. But then she gets this hypothetical impulse control shirt, a piece of wearable AI.
Sounds futuristic.
It does. But the idea is it enhances her metacognitive skills, her ability to monitor and manage her own impulses,
So it helps her gain control.
to the point where she can make competent moral decisions about her emotional responses. The interesting claim here is the AI might actually make her become a moral agent in that specific area, where maybe she wasn't fully before.
Wow, so the tech enables agency itself. That's powerful. What about Riku? He's on the autism spectrum.
Riku struggles to interpret emotions, social cues. This means he might miss morally relevant things in social situations, maybe not realize he's hurt someone's feelings.
So that impacts his ability to deliberate properly based on moral reasons in those contexts, the
Yeah.
knowledge or understanding part.
Precisely. But then he gets a smart helmet.
Another futuristic device.
Right. This helmet detects emotions from faces, movements, voice tones, and feeds that info to Riku.
Ah, so it translates the social world for him.
In a way, yes. It gives him the data he needs to understand the situation and react appropriately. It strengthens his moral agency in those social interactions. It's amplifying a capacity he has, but which is limited without the tech.
Okay, enabling and amplifying. The third positive case is Lisa with depression.
Lisa understands moral reasons. She can figure out the right thing to do, but the depression saps her motivation to actually act. She struggles with that third condition, the capacity to be guided by those reasons.
That disconnect between knowing and doing.
Exactly. So the proposed AI is a motivation pump. It monitors her mood, maybe predicts good times to act, potentially even gives chemical boosts for confidence or follow-through.
Trying to bridge that motivation gap.
The aim is to enhance her capacity to be motivated by the moral reasons she already understands, helping her translate deliberation into action.
These are really compelling, positive examples. AI helping people overcome genuine barriers to moral agency.
They show the potential upside, definitely. But the paper is balanced. It also looks at the downsides, how AI extenders could diminish agency.
Right, the flip side of the coin, which is just as important for us to consider.
Absolutely. These are cautionary tales. Take Recco. He uses a cognitive assistant app for daily tasks, scheduling, messages, that kind of thing. Starts off helpful
Okay, seems standard enough, like a fancy planner.
at first, but the app gets pushy. Constant prompts, suggestions, optimizations. Recco starts feeling like he's not really in charge anymore.
Like the app is running his life.
Yeah. He feels manipulated. His sense of free choice erodes. Even though it's meant to help, it ends up undermining his agency. The feeling of control is lost.
That's subtle but significant. What about Jari and the memory enhancer?
Jari wants to improve himself, uses this device.
Yeah.
And it works. His memory gets better, but it also starts malfunctioning.
Oh.
It creates false memories. It distorts his perception of his own past, his relationships.
So his whole basis for making judgments is corrupted.
Exactly. His moral deliberation is now based on inaccurate information, flawed premises. His capacity for morally adequate deliberation is compromised, undermining his agency. Relying on faulty tech can really mess with your grasp on reality.
That's quite scary. And the last negative case, Sari.
Sari gets a moral enhancer because she wants to sort of outsource the hard work of moral decision-making. Maybe she finds it draining.
Okay. And does it work?
Initially, the outcomes might seem fine. The device guides her to do good things. But over time, Sari loses her own intrinsic motivation.
She doesn't feel connected to the actions anymore.
Right. They don't feel genuinely hers. Her ability to be motivated by moral reasons herself fades. Her agency is diminished. Even if her behavior looks okay on the surface, it raises that question. Can you outsource morality without losing something essential?
These negative cases really drive home the risks. Feeling manipulated, basing decisions on false data, losing internal motivation.
It makes you ask, how do we assign responsibility then, when agency is tangled up with tech in these ways?
And the paper notes an interesting asymmetry here, right? Between the positive and negative cases.
Yeah, it feels different. In the positive cases, Mari, Riku, Lisa, it seems like the person plus AI system becomes a moral agent, achieving something the person alone couldn't.
Agency is created or enhanced.
But in the negative cases, Reiko, Jari, Sari, it feels more like the person's existing agency is being interfered with, suppressed by the tech.
So should we think of the AI as part of the agent in both scenarios, or only when it's helping?
That's the tricky part. It bumps up against those philosophical debates. Extended cognition versus embedded cognition. Is the tool part of the cognitive process, or just an external influence?
And the paper suggests agency might be different from cognition here.
Kind of. They say we should look at it from an action perspective. Is the person still in control? Or is there manipulation happening? That feeling of control seems vital.
which is harder with AI, maybe. Compared to a notepad, AI adapts, it's less predictable.
Totally. You might have what they call transparency in use. It works smoothly. You don't notice the seams, but lack a deeper understanding of how it's working or how it's changing you.
So you might not even realize your agency is being eroded.
It's possible.
Hmm.
Which brings us to the ethics of design.
Right. It's not just on the user. Designers have a responsibility here.
A huge one. They need to think about the context of use, the potential impacts on agency, not just the function.
And coming back to that asymmetry,
Hmm.
why do the positive and negative cases feel so different?
Well, the paper floats an idea. Maybe the capacities that belong to a moral agent are what we use to identify the boundaries of their cognitive system.
Meaning?
If the AI enables a core capacity of moral agency, like self-control for Mari or understanding for Riku, we're more likely to see it as becoming part of the agent.
Constituting agency.
But if it seems to undermine those capacities, maybe we resist that idea. Maybe we instinctively pull back and say, no, that's just an external factor messing things up, more like embedded cognition, especially in risky cases.
Interesting. So it's not just a technical distinction, but maybe a normative one, too.
Could be. Ultimately, the paper stresses context. Whether an AI extender is good or bad ethically depends massively on the specifics.
The function, the user, their existing abilities, the social setting.
All of it. There's no simple thumbs up or thumbs down.
Okay. So wrapping this up, the big takeaway seems to be that these AI extenders are genuinely powerful. They can reshape moral agency, amplifying it or diminishing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that forces us to rethink responsibility in these new human-AI hybrid systems. It's a fundamental shift.
The paper leaves us with some big questions, too. Normative ones, like when are these extenders actually needed?
Versus when are they just convenient or even harmful?
Mm-hmm.
When do the risks to autonomy outweigh the benefits?
And how do we educate people about this so they can make informed choices?
Critical questions. And then there's the justice angle.
Right. Is fixing a deficiency different from just enhancing someone who's already capable? What about access?
If these things become common, who gets them? Will it create new divides, new dependencies?
It really points to the need for careful, tailored, ethical oversight as these technologies develop. It can't be one size fits all.
Definitely not.
Huh.
It has to consider the individual, the application, the potential impacts.
So maybe a final thought for people to chew on, building on Ilari. As we start relying more on AI extenders, maybe even to meet social expectations of competence or control, how might that change our very definition of what a fully capable agent even is? And what happens if access isn't equal? What new kinds of vulnerability or exclusion might emerge when our moral capacities themselves are technologically entangled?
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot to think about. A really crucial question for the future.
It is indeed. And that's our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us.